If you own a car, it's your responsibility to take good care of it. Most modern cars have many sensors and features that help them run well, so knowing about how your car works can help you handle problems, like when your car shuts off while you're driving. So, in today's video, we'll go over the 8 common reasons why your car might shut off while you're driving. Let's get started. Number 1. Empty fuel tank. Most car owners know it's important to regularly check your fuel level while driving. It's good to have enough fuel for your trip, but if your fuel gauge or fuel level sender is broken and doesn't show the correct amount of fuel, you could be in serious trouble. To see if your fuel gauge or fuel level sensor is faulty, try putting 1 gallon, 4 liters of fuel in your car and see if it starts. Number 2. Faulty fuel pump or fuel system. The fuel pump delivers the right amount of fuel to the engine, so if it fails, the engine will shut off, leaving you stranded. There's no bypass for a bad fuel pump, and it must be fixed or replaced. At the same time, a clogged fuel filter can also prevent the pump from pushing fuel through. If it gets clogged, not enough fuel reaches the engine, causing it to shut off. Fortunately, changing a fuel filter is usually simple. Just a reminder that most fuel pumps are in the fuel tank, so if your car shuts off, try gently kicking the fuel tank. If the car starts, the fuel pump likely has a problem. Be careful not to hit the plastic fuel tank with anything sharp to avoid making a hole. When your car suddenly restarts after shutting off, a bad fuel pump is often the cause. Number 3. Battery issues. The battery provides the power needed to start the engine and run electrical systems when the engine is off. So if the battery is weak or has poor connections, it can cause the car to lose power and the engine to shut off unexpectedly. A bad battery can also affect the alternator's ability to charge it properly. If the alternator can't supply enough power, the car may stall. Number 4. Faulty ignition switch. Your car might sometimes shut off while you're driving because of a broken ignition switch, which is located behind the ignition lock and can be activated when you turn the key to start the car. Inside this switch are tiny metal plates that can corrode and rust over time. If this happens and one of these plates disconnects, it can turn off the entire ignition, causing the engine to shut off suddenly. Luckily, this issue is easy to check by wiggling the key in the ignition or checking for loose connections. Number 5. Faulty crankshaft position sensor. A malfunctioning crankshaft position sensor is the most common reason a vehicle cuts out while driving. In most car models, the engine needs the crankshaft sensor to function. Some cars also have a camshaft position sensor, which the car can use if the crankshaft sensor fails. However, a bad crankshaft position sensor can cause the engine to stop running, so if your car only has a crankshaft position sensor and no camshaft sensor, and you get a trouble code, you need to replace the sensor as soon as possible. Number 6. Overheating engine. An overheating engine can cause the car to turn off while driving to prevent serious damage. Overheating can happen due to problems like a failing radiator, low coolant levels, a broken water pump, or a bad thermostat. When the engine gets too hot, sensors may signal the ECU to shut down the engine to protect critical parts from damage. Number 7. Malfunctioning sensors. Modern vehicles use numerous sensors to optimize the air-fuel ratio and reduce fuel consumption. If one of these sensors malfunctions, it can cause the engine to shut off. Fortunately, most sensors won't completely turn off the engine. However, sensors like the MAF sensor, coolant temperature sensor, and oxygen sensor can mess up the air-fuel mixture so badly that the engine stalls. Number 8. Alternator problems. If your car suddenly stops running, the alternator might also be the reason. When the alternator fails, important parts of your car won't get power, and you might see the dashboard lights go out, or the engine lose power suddenly. Sometimes you'll spot a red battery light on your dashboard if the alternator is acting up. But if your car still has power and the starter works after it shuts off while you're driving, the alternator might not be the problem. So what should you do when your car suddenly stops when you're in the middle of driving? Here are some steps you can take. Step number 1. Check trouble codes. Older cars needed a multimeter, or your instincts, to figure out what's wrong. Luckily, newer cars have diagnostic software. It can spot when a sensor is acting up and store a fault code. You don't have to check every sensor yourself anymore, which saves time. Plus, you won't have to guess and swap out parts randomly. So the best way to find out why your car shuts off while driving is by checking these trouble codes in the ECM. But you'll need an OBD2 scanner to read the codes. Once you've got the info from the scanner, you can keep troubleshooting. For example, if there's a trouble code for the crankshaft position sensor, check the wiring and maybe replace the sensor. Step number 2, fill the fuel tank. Sometimes it's easy to forget you need gas until it's too late. When your fuel gets low, the fuel pump might suck in air instead of fuel, causing the engine to stall, especially when turning fast. Also, your fuel gauge might be wrong, showing a full tank when it's actually low. So, to be sure, open the fuel cap and add a bit of fuel. Step number 3, check your dashboard. When your car shuts off, check the dashboard lights. If they turn off too, it could be a problem with the ignition switch. But remember, it might also be caused by low battery voltage from a bad alternator, so it's a good idea to check both. Step number 4, check fuel pressure. Use a manual pressure gauge on the fuel rail or line for the best check. If there's a pressure sensor, you can use a diagnostic scanner, but it might not always work right. If the pressure is low, inspect the fuel filter, pump, and pressure regulator. Make sure to check your car's fuel pressure specs too. Step number 5, check alternator voltage. If you can't find any error codes or don't have an OBD2 scanner, check the alternator voltage. Just start the engine and use a multimeter to check the battery voltage. If it's less than 12.5 volts, your alternator might be acting up. Step number 6, check the tachometer. In many cars, the crankshaft position sensor tells the RPM meter, or tachometer, on your dashboard how fast the engine is spinning. If your car shuts off while driving or won't start, it might mean there's an issue with the crankshaft or camshaft position sensor. Step number 7, talk to a professional. If your car keeps shutting off despite trying the tips above, it's time to get help from a pro. It might cost some money, but it's worth it to have someone experienced to look at it. A mechanic might not be more expensive if they can find and fix the problem quickly without replacing the wrong parts. There you have it. If you find videos like this helpful, make sure to like and subscribe so we can assist you fix it.